Today, I want to talk about challenges for governance of SOEs. And I think what we have heard before throughout the first day and again this morning is actually a good base on which I can build. There are three aspects that I want to cover. I want to cover board appointment and composition, organizational objectives, and delegation of authority. Now, why do I choose these? As has been said previously, the appointment of directors is critical to how boards perform. And if these directors are not the appropriate people, you're going to have a board that is not delivering what it should deliver. Objectives. Every organization has to understand that it is there to meet the needs of the people. There is a particular reason that it has been established. And it has to ensure that it has set objectives which will allow it to meet those needs. So why does the organization exist? What does a nation expect us to deliver? And lastly, delegation of authority. And I'm going to do this in my 10 minutes. So sorry I don't have my slides out, but let me speak to them. We always have to remember that at the base or at the start of everything is the citizens. The citizens are like our shareholders, and I come from a private sector background, so I have brought my private sector self to public sector governance. So our citizens, they are the ones who empower the government. They elect the government, and then the government now appoints the board, and the board is responsible to select the CEO and oversee how the CEO operates. And so that is the structure we have in Jamaica. And listening to Dr. Farrell a while ago, I realized that our situation is somewhat simpler than it is in Trinidad. So at the end of the day, the board of the state-owned enterprise is accountable to the minister, but ultimately the board is accountable to the citizens. In Jamaica, as was mentioned this morning, we have a corporate governance framework for public bodies. Principle 10 of that corporate governance framework provides that the responsible minister should appoint board members based on merit, against objective criteria, with due regard for the benefits of diversity and commitment to the policy objectives of the government. So, evolving from that are board competency profiles. So in Jamaica, every public sector board has a competency profile which shows these are the competencies that are required to serve on this board. And then when directors are appointed, they must fit within the competencies that are set out within that profile. So the question was asked this morning as to whether or not you would have to have persons with specific skills for specific boards. And the answer in Jamaica would be yes. Yes, we would have the financial expert. Yes, we would have the legal expert. But in my case, I serve on the board of the National Solid Waste Management Authority. So we there have to have experts in the environment and in waste management. So every board in Jamaica is required to have a profile, and the persons who are appointed could still be the minister's friend, but the person must fit within the profile. Jamaica has gone a bit further. And as Greta mentioned this morning, in June of 2018, our government issued a policy for the nomination, selection, and appointment of directors. So, and this is now passed the lower house as law, but it's not yet passed the upper house. And that law, when it comes into being, and what is now a policy that is being adhered to, is doing a lot of things that were mentioned this morning by the Curacao Code. So in terms of who can be appointed to a board, that is now established. In terms of the criteria, that is now going to be set out in law. The So some of the criteria that have to be looked at, and I won't go into them, are things like merit and competence, accountability and integrity, transparency. Those are the requirements which you now have to meet in order to serve on the board. And also commitment and capacity to serve. So we now limit the number of boards you can serve on. No more than 3, and chair no more than 1, or is it 2? And so you must demonstrate that you have both the commitment and the capacity. So back to our corporate governance framework for public bodies, it says that at principle 1, every public body should be headed by an effective board, which is collectively responsible for strategic management and oversight. It serves as the focal point for corporate governance and is accountable to the responsible minister and shareholder representatives. So if you are responsible for strategic oversight and you are responsible for ensuring the organization meets its objectives, then you have to have systems which allow you to do this. In addition to the corporate governance framework for public bodies, we have our PBMA, or Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act. And that is, again, enshrined in law. This is the law. And it says that the board shall develop specific and measurable objectives and performance targets. The board shall ensure efficient and effective management of the public body and the accountability of management. The board shall enter into a performance contract with the CEO. So the role of the board is very, very clear. The board sets the tone at the top, the board sets the strategic objectives, and the board holds the managing director accountable. It's been a long-standing challenge for boards to ensure that the organizations that they are in charge of, the organizations which they're responsible for, meet objectives. And so I've kind of looked at it from a private sector approach. You have your board of directors. The board of directors, you have your strategic objectives, which you have agreed with your ultimate shareholders, but you have your objectives for the year. You have to make so much in money. You have to meet these sales targets. You have to open so many branches. Whatever it is that you do, you have your objectives. Now the board passes these objectives down to the CEO, and this becomes the objectives of the CEO against which he is measured. The CEO in turn hands these objectives down to his respective managers, and they too now they're measured, and their bonuses and their salaries are based on the achievement of those objectives. Similarly, those senior managers now pass the objectives down to the other staff. And so it is that you have your entire organization aligned in order to achieve the objectives. Now, in the first place in government with state-owned enterprises, the minister gives policy direction. So in Jamaica, the minister gives general policy directions. So those policy directions are what would have been given to the board, against which the board would have set the strategic objectives, which are handed down to the CEO and which now flow throughout the whole organization. So this is how you get the entire organization aligned to achieving the objectives of that state-owned enterprise, and thereby fulfilling the needs of the citizens of the nation. What we do in many of the boards that I sit on is every month our CEO has to come and share with us performance against the objectives. So the objectives are time bound and we can track. At the end of the year, you are required by law to report the achievements to your responsible ministry, and then ultimately your minister lays a report in Parliament. So in this COVID-19 environment, one of the things I would say as we look at our objectives is we have to now bear in mind that it is somewhat of a different world. Governments are now cash strapped. It is more important than ever that we are ensuring that we get value for money. So directors now need to go back to the drawing board and ensure that the strategic objectives that have been set are the ones that are going to meet the needs of their citizens at this point in time. And I think it behooves us to look and see, are we doing things in the most efficient way? Can they be delivered differently? So for example, our company's office, we're pressing them to do things online. What technologies are available? Those are the sorts of discussions that boards who are responsible for strategic management need to be having. We need to be forward looking, but at the same time ensuring that we are delivering on the objectives for our nation. The last point I would make is the delegation of authority, because that has always been a challenge. What is the board supposed to do versus what is the CEO supposed to do? And there I would recommend to you that each board needs to have a clear delegation of authority. So for example, expenditure. Let's look at expenditures. That's always a contentious one. Once the board is approved, it's normal for the CEO to be authorized to spend money within the approved budget. However, if the expenditure is not within the approved budget, it has to come back to the board. So the delegation of authority would say that the CEO is authorized to spend within budget, outside of budget, back to the board. In some instances, boards that I serve on, we give the CEO no authority for settlements. So say there is litigation and a settlement is proposed, that has to come to the board. So a clear delegation of authority helps to solve that problem of who is responsible for what, because our founding state-owned enterprises, very often nothing gets done because people are not sure who is authorized to do what, and everybody is afraid of their shadow. A clear delegation of authority assists in that regard. And that's it. Those are the three ones that I wanted to talk about.